Greetings, family. I am Arlene Kahet. Kahet means purifying light of God, and this is my beloved King Teasdell, also known as King Obadele. And today we are going to be reading from the prophet.
So before we begin that, I gotta just let you guys know. I know you guys don't know, but now you know. There's a sense of somberness in my emotions are strange, right? And the strangeness of emotions are there for a reason. I don't know the fullness of that, but I want to start with an Our Father prayer. Primarily because today's my father's birthday. He would have been 94. He died in the year 2000. So it's about 20 years. And what I find interesting is well, let's start with the prayer. Well, yesterday we talked about reparations. Hey, what's up? What's up, Anthony? Yeah, we spoke of reparations yesterday. We spoke of spirit. We spoke of healing. And I think maybe we'll find some healing in this particular passage today, which is a passage called Speak to Us of Freedom. So I know my mood is going to shift as we continue to move forward. So let's get our Father prayer together and say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespass, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, both now and forevermore. Amen. I written something not too long ago, which indicated there was a strange experience now with the Our Father prayer, because oftentimes we're told when we have a loved one that transitions into the next life, they go to heaven. So when I say Our Father who art in heaven, it kind of has a different ring to it, a different meaning. With that being said, I've learned how to speak it in Aramaic, which is the language that Christ used back in his day. It may not be exactly the same dialect, because there are so many different aspects of what Aramaic and different languages are. But with that being said, I will probably find some solace in saying it in Aramaic, which goes, it's the same words, it's just in different language. And let us begin. Abun dibush maya, nitka dishmak, tete malkutank, nikwe sibiana, haikana dibush maya, af ba'ar af. Ablan lakma, desun kana yomana. Wash buklan kauben hak dehen, haikana dafganana swakal halal bain. Wela ta lan lin suna. Ila batzan min bisha. Mitol talake malkutank. Wahela watesh bukta. La alam almin. Amen. And there was a moment of silence for my dad. Hey, Dad, how you doing? Yeah. it's an emotional thing, so it is what it is, and we're going to move forward with what we have. I just came back from tapping base with my mom because she lives right next door, and it's an emotional day for her too. Her grandson went to a party yesterday and said he wasn't coming home last night, and she's 88 years old, and he is staying with her, and her emotions are, what's going on with this young man? He knows what's going on out here in the world today. He should reach out to me. So who calls? She calls him, right? So I'm sure to have a discussion with him when he returns. He's like 38 years old, but she still is grandma. What more can I say? And today we speak of freedom. So I find that interesting because there's the freedom of death, which is an interesting concept because we are flesh-bound, earth-bound, if you will, because we are actually spirit creatures, spirit beings. And then at the same time, there's that aspect of feeling independent, which I'm gathering he has a mindset of because he's lived by himself for some time. There's just been some issues in the relationships that he has been involved in, which now, I guess, having to come back to grandma's house, it just doesn't feel the same as being independent, which he really wasn't independent then. He had a girlfriend then. Well, I ain't even going to go there.
Oh my gosh.
You see what I'm saying? You have to sometimes work through your emotions, and so that's what I'm doing, I guess. So with that being said, we're going to let Arlene... And you want me to start reading? Or?
No.
Okay.
We already talked about it, so
Right.
I'm going to start it off. All right. And an orator said, "Speak to us of freedom." And he answered, "At the city gate and by your fireside, I have seen you prostrate yourself and worship your own freedom, even as slaves humble themselves before a tyrant and praise him through his slaying that is his praise him through though he slays them. I, in the grove of the temple and in the shadow of the citadel, I have seen the freest among you wear their freedom as a yoke and a handcuff." Kind of serious there. "And my heart bled within me, for you can only be free when you even desire of seeking freedom becomes a harness to you, and when you cease to speak of freedom as a goal and a fulfillment." Hi, Michael.
Hey, what's up, my man? "You shall be free indeed when your days are not without a care, nor your nights without a want and a grief, but rather when these things girdle your life, and yet you rise above them naked and unbound." Did that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't understand it. You want me to read it again?
Go ahead if you feel the need.
Okay. "You shall be free indeed when your days are not without a care, nor your nights without a want and a grief." Okay. "But rather when these things girdle your life, and yet you rise above them naked and unbound." Okay, so that's pretty much what I was saying earlier when I said you rise up from your being, your physical being, because we are bound in the flesh. We are earthbound. So maybe that could be a part of that emotion thing I was talking about. Anyway, we will continue the reading. "And how shall you rise beyond your days and nights unless you break the chains with which at the dawn of your understanding have fastened around your noon hour. Interesting. For it was noon today that I shifted into this space. Moving forward. In truth, that which you call freedom is the strongest of these chains, though its links glitter in the sun and dazzle your eyes. And what is it but fragments of your own self you would discard that you may become free? If it is an unjust law you would abolish, that law was written with your own hand upon your own forehead. You cannot erase it by burning your law books, nor by washing the forehead of your judges, though you pour the sea upon them. That's a lot of water. And if it is a despot you would dethrone, whoa, we're not going to go there. See first that his throne erected within you is destroyed. Ha! For how can a tyrant rule the free and the proud, but for a tyranny in their own freedom and a shame in their own pride? And if it is a care you would cast off, that care has been chosen by you rather than imposed upon you. Yes, this is true. I was caring about my dad today and it imposed itself upon me. But now I will cast it off. Moving forward. Because I guess, because everything of life is a choice in such an amazing way, because is it not so that you would even choose to have one impose himself upon you? For there's other options. But I continue reading?
Yeah, continue reading and then we'll talk.
Okay. So, and if it is a care you would cast off, that care has been chosen rather than imposed upon you. And if it is a fear you would dispel, the seat of that fear is in your heart and not in the hand of the feared. Verily, all things move within your being in constant half embrace. The desired and the dreaded, the repugnant and the cherished, the pursued and that which you would escape. These things move within you as lights and shadows in pairs that cling. And when the shadow fades and is no more, the light that lingers becomes a shadow to another light. Wow. And thus your freedom, when it loses its fetters, become itself the fetter of a greater freedom.
You want to start off or should I?
You should begin this indeed.
So, one of the things that I find really interesting, that I really would, you could really go down the rabbit hole.
Oh, let's go down there. Let's just make a bit by something other than a rabbit.
So, one of the things that I find interesting is that if the consciousness of, first you have to really kind of define what freedom is. And what is that? What is that? Um, because there are people who would say the ability to do to do anything that they desire. However, there are people whose consciousness are so caught up that they make manifest tyrants. So one of the things that I always found interesting is when I would study history from other countries other than here in the United States. One of the things that became clear to me, especially when I started the studies of metaphysics, is that they would say, the consciousness of the people actually creates the leaders that lead them. So what type of consciousness created that leader that made that leader make itself manifest? And so even if you think about our own recent history here in the United States, there is the stuff that we are not dealing with within this country that made the outgoing administration come forward. And
not want to leave.
And not want to go anywhere.
Okay. Let's make sure we put that out there.
Okay, yes.
That's an unusual experience.
Yes.
It's making history in and of itself.
So the thing is that, we as a country, this for the most part is represented as what many would call in metaphysics our shadow, as a collective.
And what would you define a shadow as?
Okay, so the shadow is the stuff that we don't want to talk about, that we don't want to deal with, and that we are not addressing. So the thing is that, and the thing is that this is reflective as a collective, but this can also be applied to your own personal life. So if there are things that you are not dealing with, if you continue to see patterns that come up with the type of people that you're dating, or the types of relationships that you're having, that they just sort of, kind of blow up in your face, or whatever the case may be, it's the stuff that really gets your goat. It's those buttons that you have that people can push. All of that stuff is considered our shadow. And the thing is that, what's really being shared here is that if you are not dealing with your inner world, and dealing with those buttons that you have, that you're not free, because these things would not manifest if we were actually addressing them. So the thing is that, in people's idolizing or idealizing what freedom is, and even in our idolizing what freedom is, we are still not free, because we are not dealing with our own stuff.
Mr. Smith clearly indicates this. In the Matrix, which he says, we are not free, Mr. Anderson. It is you who has brought me here. And it is because of this we must understand purpose. Purpose is what drives us. It's what drives us. It's not what we're speaking of. It's we're talking about.
He's talking about the movie, but it is
The Matrix.
Yeah,
but it speaks of how freedom really is a strange
concept,
because What is freedom? When your mind is wrapped around things that enslave you.
Mm-hmm. And well, I mean, when you think about it, this could really even be.
Hey, Reggie. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, this could even be applied to people who have their own vices.
Smoking cigarettes and watching Captain Kangaroo. Don't tell me I have nothing to do. Ain't that a vice?
Yeah. So really, when I read this, the thought that really comes to mind is that the freedom that you are seeking is the freedom from those things that would that that really are your buttons. Like he even shares here that you have to get rid of the tyrant. You can get rid of the tyrant outside of outside of you. But you need to deal with that tyrant within, because if you don't deal with it, if you don't deal with that aspect of yourself, then it will reappear.
Well, it's interesting because listen to what it says in the first section. It says, "At the city gate and by your fireside, I have seen you prostrate yourself
Mm-hmm.
and worship your own freedom." Now, you prostrate yourself to show oftentimes allegiance. You prostrate yourself to oftentimes show submission.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is this aspect of submission, a devotion, if you will, um, uh, it's okay. So let's stick with the prostrate in the sense of submission, okay? Because the next line says this. So I'm going to read them both together so we can kind of catch this. "At the city gate and by your fireside, I have seen you prostrate yourself and worship your own freedom, even as slaves humble themselves before a tyrant and praise him though he slays them." So even in private and in public, you are showing this aspect of obedience, servitude.
Yes, I think that when I hear that particular line and when I read it, the thought that really came to my mind is, there are some people who are really not going to be happy with me when I say this, but my personal feeling about the the way that people really wrap themselves in being patriotic is blasphemous. And I say this because my personal feeling is that you should not give your allegiance to anybody except God. And there are people who do treat their allegiance to their country as if it's a god. It it
Now, this is the thing that I'll add to that, which is interesting. And take note. What I heard being said is this. Now, you may want to replay this, but this is what I heard said. You are giving your allegiance, the only logical allegiance to be giving is to that which makes you.
and that's the only place in which you really, to my way of thinking, have any type of freedom, because the one that makes you, or the consciousness that makes you, is the only one that, or the only thing that can possibly free you from your own stuff, from your own chains, from your own shackles, that would get in the way of freedom.
And people identify oftentimes with the thing that makes them belong or make them feel that they belong.
Mm-hmm.
And like a football team, you're going to sit there and get yourself all caught up in an allegiance to a team because you identify with it
Mm-hmm.
in such a way to where there's people that will be fighting at stadiums because they have such an allegiance to
Mm-hmm.
a team. Now, this is a football team.
It's a
That's
game,
not
and
putting money in
in
your
your
pocket.
pocket.
It's not giving you a salary. There is no perks that you are receiving because of the allegiance that you may have. And the strangest thing is, they don't even know who you are.
You're a dollar sign to them.
Even if they choose to see that portion. Because there's some people who throw a penny in the street and say, oh, that don't amount to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's pennies that makes dimes, and dimes that makes all other things, dollars and all of that. But what crossed my mind is in the Matrix, which is interesting, that Morpheus said to Neo that people are so enabled by the Matrix, that which they are locked into, that which they feel so much a part of, until they will defend it
Mm-hmm.
to the point of death. And he says, and this is why it makes them our enemy. Now, enemy, and sounds, word sounds, I've been working with for years. And enemy and inner me sound very much alike. So if your inner me is not aligned appropriately, your inner me can become your inner me. But you won't see that enemy because you're too busy looking at what you believe is you. Again, something that has bound your consciousness. For it continues to say this: I, in the grove of the temple, and in the shadow of the citadel, I have seen the freest among you wear their freedom as a yoke and a handcuff. And my heart bleeds within me. For you can only be free when even the desire of seeking freedom becomes a harness to you, and when you cease to speak of freedom as a goal and a fulfillment. So you must be freedom as opposed to seek freedom. It says, for you can only be free when even the desire of seeking freedom becomes a harness for you. The desire to be yoked becomes a harness for you. Speak about that. And my heart bleeds within me, for you can only be free when even the desire of seeking freedom becomes a harness for you. And when you cease to speak of freedom as a goal and a fulfillment.
Okay, so I recall hearing a story of a man that was in a concentration camp during World War II. And one of the things that he did, he was, of course, in the concentration camp, but he started this process of inwardly imagining himself walking down the streets of, I believe it was,
The place that was not a concentration camp.
yeah,
I'm just saying.
exactly. So he, it was someplace over in the U.S. That he imagined himself, and there was a friend of his that had actually to moved over to the U.S. And so inwardly he started this process of seeing himself walking down the streets, and taking in the sights of, I believe it was someplace in California, exactly where I'm not sure. However, what in the concentration camp, what they would do is that they would actually count the prisoners. And one day, he had done this mental rehearsal so much that one day when the guards were counting the prisoners, the guard got distracted, and then when it came to counting him, he gave the person that he was counting the wrong number. He started up again at the wrong place. And so, knowing this, somehow he walked out of the concentration camp, and the guards never realized that he had left he never left the camp. He just walked out. I believe there was something where he was able to get a hold of a uniform as well. But he walked out, and he walked into the woods, and he eventually got himself over to Europe. And when he got to Europe, he was able to take a ferry over to the United States.
A ferry to the United States?
Well, not a ferry, but a ship.
Because that would have to be Tinkerbell. Get over here from there.
Excuse me. Not ferry, but ship. He took a ship over to the United States. And then, he at some point lived out his experience of actually walking with his friend down the street, taking in the sights, and no longer being bound by that experience. But the thing is that in order to truly be free, we have to be in a place of, the thing is that he was made to experience, or he impressed upon infinite intelligence to the point that he was no longer in a place of being in a concentration camp and being over in a place where he would not be harmed, that he would be safe enough that he did not have to go through the experience of being a prisoner.
So his freedom was first
In the mind.
realized in the conscious mind.
Yeah, beings who are truly free don't have to be in a place of fighting so much for their freedom, because they have to first be in a place of having the consciousness of freedom.
Okay, makes sense, because to truly be free, you have to be free.
Be free.
So I guess one would say the law of attraction by theory, if you're thinking that you're enslaved, well then that's your thought, and your thought is what's going to be the thing that's impressing upon you, which is the cage that confines you. But if you seek out that which is the desire to be free, then your freedom, hey John, Valerie, what's up? The freedom expresses itself outwardly in the environment that will draw you to it. So even then, it's not seeking freedom becomes, I guess it is what he says here, for you can only be free when even the desire of seeking freedom becomes a harness to you. So the harness held you, because a harness is different than a yoke. Let me explain. You jump out of a plane. You don't want to hold your parachute by your hands, because that's not a good idea. But if you have the harness to hold you, if you jump out the plane with the parachute, you can't really be much more free than to jump out of a plane into the ether, and you are free. There's nothing holding you. There's no restraints, there's no constriction. You may feel some resistance of the air itself as you're moving forward, but you are free falling. Now, in that freedom, there must be some logic. For you are designed to continue your fall. And at the rate of the free fall, if there's not a harness that's attached to the parachute, there would be a different type of freedom once you hit the ground. Because your spirit is not going to hang out in that body after an impact like that. It's just not going to happen. That's why it's important to have the harness. Because the harness allows you to be embraced, if one may say, held. The best word, I think, would be enveloped in the protection of freedom. How's that? Where the yoke is something that is wrapped around you, that someone, chances are, put upon you, and yours is to be enslaved by it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that there is this mindset that we need to use might, might in order to achieve having freedom. At least that is the consciousness here in this country in regards to that.
So.
And so, because people are of this mindset,
Which mindset is that?
That you need to use might in order to achieve freedom. That because they operate in that space of, and again, a lot of controversy. I know that there's some people whose buttons I'm going to be pushing when I say this, but because there's this idea, perception that you have to use might in order to achieve freedom, they're not really free, because they are actually fighting somebody else's ideal of what freedom is, and it isn't truly representative of their own internal freedom, other than the freedom or the idea of freedom that they were given.
So I don't know. I went next door, and there was this woman on TV. Let me be clear. And she was bound. And she was in this place to where she was able to knock over a mirror, large mirror, and somehow knocking over the mirror, she was able to bring the piece of glass of the mirror to a place of which she was able to get it between her hands, and the rope that was bound had her bound. So she's bound and she's seeking freedom. And she took what she could of it and moved it back and forth to cut the rope. And eventually it happened and she was able to take off and get out of there. But I left. And I don't know the rest of the story because I have no idea what was going on. It was just something that I find interesting, that we speak of this thing called freedom, because the next line here says, "You shall be free indeed when your days are not without a care, nor your nights without a want and a grief, but rather when these things girdle your life, and yet you rise above them naked and unbound." So, on TV she had her clothes on, but who knows what had her bound. And people who are captured as maybe sex slaves, or whatever horrid thing we could think of, they remove their clothing. Because there's no sense in going back and forth with clothing with something that should be naked, if one may say so. If this is the case, but it should not even been in the first place. So it's not that I'm condoning this thing. I'm just kind of trying to paint a picture here. So there is that which is bound. As it says, "You shall be free indeed when your days are not without a care." Well, she has a care because she's tied up. "Nor your nights without a want and a grief." Well, she's grief because she wants to be free, right? But rather when these things girdle your life, and yet you rise above them. So they girdled her life. They had her locked in that place, okay? Now, you rise above them naked and unbound. So now she's free. And being naked, let's utilize that as the sense of now she can get out of the building, the thing that had her surrounded, the thing that has us surrounded. Sometimes our ambitions have us surrounded. Our addictions have us surrounded. Our thoughts of what do I need to do tomorrow has us surrounded. Our food has us surrounded. What am I going to eat? Although eating is a need. But do you have a yoke upon you that has you eating when you have already been satisfied, when the body has already been quenched, or well, quench actually involves more with water, but
satiated.
Yeah, you're sated from that which you was eating, but you're being bound has you locked in, and you gotta get more. You gotta become a glutton. You know,
they would say, there are spiritual practices that, that free people up from having to eat.
Yeah, well, Anthony says, I believe you have to be free mind, body, and soul to be free. Yes, I believe that's true. Yeah, because I think that's exactly where he's headed with this. Because it's interesting how he puts this together. Because the next line he says, and how shall you rise beyond your days and nights unless you break the chains which you at the dawn of your understanding have fastened around your noon hour? In truth, that which you call freedom is the strongest of these chains, though its links glitter in the sun and dazzle your eyes. And what is it but fragments of your own self that would discard that you may become free? And what is it but fragments of your own self you would discard that you may become free? So yeah, you have to be free, mind, body, and soul, because any of these not free can be bound, can be something that holds you, that binds you, that keeps you. Interesting. Thank you. Tony? Yeah.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why so far I haven't really gotten anybody to be on board with me with this thought. But one of the things that I try to reiterate, especially with, my brothers and sisters here in the United States, is that a lot of times when it comes to the issues, and I get it that we're so close from things being the way they were, where black people were enslaved, to now, is to, not that I don't think that we should acknowledge our history, but our ancestors have already served that sentence of being enslaved. And so we need to consider what is our next part of this journey. And that once we get to a place where we are no longer at the mercy of the anger that is driven by people who clearly have no love for themselves and do not recognize our humanity, that we need to continue to do our own inner work or our own inner journey, and that that we ourselves have come to a place of becoming, work on ourselves to be truly free of this cycle of viciousness that seems to have pervaded like a virus throughout the consciousness of this planet, because it's not just here.
Yeah, because as I'm looking at the reading again, it says, if it is an unjust law you would abolish, that law was written with your own hand upon your own forehead.
Yes, so addressing whatever that is within us that continues to allow this to be a thing. So to allow this to be a thing, whatever inferiority, complex that we have been conditioned with, we need to get rid of it. Really.
And it's within you, because it continues to say you cannot erase it by burning your law books, nor by washing the foreheads of the judges, though you pour the sea upon them. So that means no matter how much of this conditioning that has occurred, of these incidents that have made this a manifestation, doing these things, getting rid of the law books, is just throwing the book in the fire.
Truly,
that doesn't do anything with what's already caught up in your head. And washing the forehead, even though you pour the sea upon them, and with soap and water. It's like that's external. So one is like super external, and the other is, even though it may seem close, it's just it boom, boom, boom.
So that
It ain't getting into the head. It's just on the head.
because there are limitations to what the people who write the laws and create them can do, really.
Yeah. And if it is a despot you would dethrone, see first that his throne erected within you is destroyed. For how can a tyrant rule the free and proud, but for a tyranny in their own freedom and a shame in their own pride? So they already got the self locked down, and now they're locking you down. You follow me? And if it is a care you would cast off, that care has been chosen by you rather than imposed upon you. And if it is a fear you would dispel, the seat of that fear is in your heart and not in the hand of the feared. So go deep within. We were talking about the rabbit hole earlier. Go deep within yourself. Find out what's happening inside of you, and then go forth with that. For it continues, it says, verily, all things move within your being in a constant half embrace. So only half of what is happening in your experience is moving in a constant half embrace. Because it's like Tony said, you have to be free mind, body, and soul. Because it continues, the desire and the dread, the repugnant and the cherish, the pursued and that which you would escape. These things move within you as lights and shadows in pairs that cling. And when the shadow fades and is no more, the light that lingers becomes a shadow to another light. You ever seen a candle shadow? If you haven't, give it a try. Get yourself a flashlight. It's funny. But the light that the candle emits brings forth a shadow when there is no light. Yet, when a stronger light comes forth, then the candle light itself becomes a shadow. So it concludes with, and thus your freedom, when it loses its fetters, becomes itself the fetter to a greater freedom. And that is the one who created all, the source of all. And we stay connected to that. And I think that is freedom. And that's another story altogether in and of itself. Because you have to first, as Arlene was saying earlier, have to identify how you have been bound.
Yes.
Yes, Tony says you have to be one with self as well. And there's a poem I wrote called The Self. And it's powerful. What's up, Halim? Peace and blessing, brother. So, freedom is key in identifying first what freedom is, and then identifying that which allows freedom, free of resistance. Okay? So freedom has to be free of resistance in order for it to be free. For if you're seeking freedom and you have not, you have it not, is it something within you that has caused this? And then you must seek deep within your heart that which has you bound. For the despot cannot be a tyrant to that which needs not seek freedom but has already found it. I remember a movie years ago. There was this guy that was like super, super cool back in the day. John Michael St. Vincent or something like that. He was in this military movie of which he was being punished or disciplined, if you will. And he had to have a bucket that he had to hold with outstretched hands on his back, I think it was rocks or something like that. And the strain was of such a degree, he was sweating bullets. But he got to a place of recognizing that in meditation, even though he was bound by this experience, he went within and he left. All right? The drill sergeant and everybody, I think, I don't remember if it was a very long time. I don't know if everybody had to do this or it was just him alone. I don't know the details, but I know that the focus was upon him. And when he chose to focus, as Arlene was saying earlier, of the man who was in prison, who focused on what freedom would be like for him. When this man who was in this disciplined state of being shifted his being into the mental meditation of not being, he didn't even feel that the things was there. He was gone. The drill sergeant was like, had to snap him up out of it.
So Anthony asked the question, is freedom free? So here's the thing, you get to experience the type of freedom based upon what we've read here, you get to experience your idea of what freedom is. And so if you think that you have to fight for your freedom, you're going to experience that, because your consciousness is just that powerful that you're going to experience yourself as being right if you feel that you have to fight for your freedom. So, in the sense, when you ask the question, is freedom free? How free? What is that? What is that to you? What does that look like? What does that feel like? And if you experience that in the mind, then eventually you will experience it in your own life, in your own beingness, in your own. So so the question truly is, what is freedom to you? What does that feel like? What does that look like? What are you doing? What is your experience when you are truly experiencing freedom?
Yeah, I think another way of seeing that too is look at the root word, dome. There's kingdom, there's dominion, there's freedom. So, Tony says he got it.
Yeah, he got it.
Yeah. So, there is always the dome of which all things, as we were saying earlier, and thus your freedom, when it loses its fetters, become itself the fetter of a greater freedom. So that which you rest in, where you find that comfort, where you are in alignment with, that feels the protection, that is no longer the restraint, the restriction, when the limitations and the resistance is no longer there. That's a peace that surpasses all understanding. Mm-hmm. And peace and freedom is probably one and the same. That's something to consider too, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. That's something to consider.
I wonder what he's going to talk about next week. Speak to us of reason and passion. Yeah, well, interesting. That it follows. And then after that it says, then tell us of pain. Well, this is interesting indeed. Well, we appreciate every one of you. Thank you so very much for tuning in, and we hope that we have been a blessing. For we know that the blessing is you being with us. And so I don't feel somber anymore, or solemn, I think it was.
Yay!
Yeah. I knew freedom. I knew it was going to be free from that. Yeah, but I give thanks for my father being a part of the experience of my life's living, to have me a part of this living, which has me at this place and point in time, to where I can even be there for my mom, be there for my beloved. Because, if he didn't shoot that sperm, where would I be? I don't know. Is that a rabbit hole? We gotta go.
Oh my goodness, you're so extra special.
But out of the millions, I was the one who won. And so are you.
Are you complete?
And so are you.
Alrighty. Yes. Mwah. Alrighty.
And so she's going to say her thing.
We love you. We bless you. We appreciate you. We thank God for you. And we know that wherever you are, God is.
Namaste, family.
You're welcome, Anthony.
Blessings, my brother. Every Sunday we do this. I thought I wasn't going to do it this Sunday because of my feeling, but you have to be mindful of your feelings. Sometimes they're leading you to a place.
Most definitely. All right.
Namaste.
Namaste, family.